Well, hey everybody, my name is Lester Martin. It is the top of the hour here in the US East Coast. We might as well get started. And if anyone's late coming, they'll be just fine. And absolutely right. Monica's out there throwing that it's a great idea to go ahead and if you haven't installed Starburst or set up with your free Starburst Galaxy, please do that. If you can't find it on starburst.io, grab that doc, the lab guide. There'll be a link right in there in the very first lab. So please, by all means, get started with that. Well, here we go. We're in the middle actually of a series of 5 different webinars. This is our second session. We're going to focus very squarely on Apache Iceberg. A little connection before content. Why not? There's myself, Lester Martin. Nice guy. I got some great folks helping me along the way here. We have Monica from our developer relations team. We have Yusuf, one of our senior solution architects here from our field. Both know a lot about Apache Iceberg, and they're primarily going to be watching the chat and helping me out to make sure we get you guys going. So, what are this session number 2? What's it all about? I got 3 slides, and then we'll get to work. Hopefully, folks will make it here. Session 1 was about Hive, or just basic data lake tables. We didn't really call it Hive, but it was about the Hive table format. We're going to learn in the labs. I'm not going to give you a lecture or anything like that. So I'm going to introduce concepts of table formats lightly in the labs as you go and focus squarely right away on the modern table format called Apache Iceberg. We're going to run some ACID transactions. We're going to see what that does to the underlying metadata, see what it does by creating new snapshots. With those snapshots, aka versions, we're going to be able to run queries looking back in time, as well as rolling the table back in time. You'll do that in the labs you have right here. And we'll do a light introduction to the fact that you can have partition evolution. You can change your partition strategy without rebuilding your table. That's pretty cool because, we had to in the past. So we're going to do all that in 1 hour, and we better get going if that's the case. All right, so quick POIs. That was slide number 1, I think. The lab guide has everything you need. Absolutely, all the steps, everything you need. I will be here walking through that lab guide. A second point on there's some credentials in there to an S3 bucket. Those are going to go away after the weekend, probably like Monday morning, Tuesday morning, somewhere in that window. But you have them through the weekend. They'll work. There's those 5 different things we're working on. We're on number 2. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. But if you kind of peek at that, there's a link in case you didn't remember how to register in the lab guide. The lab guide has it all. How do you find the lab guide? Look by your chat. There should be a docs tab there. And then the docs, if you don't already have the lab guide, this right here. If you don't have that already, that's where you'll get it. Again, some more topics we'll see as we go along. Lastly, on this slide, it says, hey, we do a lot of copy and paste. I authored this in Google Docs. I exported a PDF. And I know of at least one query toward the end that I found out last night does get messed up. So what I also recommend you do is under the docs, click on the one that says SQL from the labs. It'll just give you a dump of all the SQL. Once you get going, I encourage you to copy all of that and paste it into Starburst Galaxy. So you might want to wait till you're at that point so you don't have to paste it to your editor, then copy and paste it again. So definitely do that, and it'll speed things up. I'm going to use that as well as we go. There is a recording for session 1 for anyone that did not make it yet. Take it, participate. I don't know if we shared that all that consistently yet, but we will. We're going to share the whole series when we get to the end, but hopefully we'll try to share those before we're done. All right, last slide. We made it. We get started. I'm going to do the labs myself. What Monica probably said once or twice in the chat is go to starburst.io, hit free trial for Starburst Galaxy and set that up. We're going to jump into that in just a second. And I will pick up right in that first lab right around that time. So I'll make sure you see it in a second. And then I'll pause. I won't pause. I'll just keep talking, and then we'll do the catalog setup together and so on and so forth. For those that got my email and went ahead and did everything, that is awesome. You can interrupt me at any time through the questions and answers, and Yusuf and Monica will definitely reach out and if they need to grab you. If they can't help you themselves, they might even be able to help us. So fill up the chat. No dumb questions. We're all from all different places, times, efforts. Let's roll. Let's get into it. Hands-on labs. Let's do it. All right. Again, this is the doc that I hope you found. And remember, like I said, look by chat. There's a docs. There's also a SQL downloadable you can grab for everything. All right, links to the series, the bullets that we just covered, table of contents. We really have about 3 labs. The first lab is just making sure we all have a quick setup. In fairness, the middle 2 might be a little bigger than 15 minutes if you're doing them by yourself and reading lots of details. We'll get done with them all in about 15 minutes sharp and try to finish up at the top of the next hour, since I have a whole hour with you. All right, step number 1 was really about getting set up. So right here, if you already have a Starburst Galaxy, awesome. Skip this step. Fall down to step 2. And if you don't, click this link right here. I told you how to go find it, but there's the link. That link is going to simply say, hey, fill a name, Joe, I can't come up with a last name, Smith. And he's at joesmith@smithwhatever.com. You're not a robot. Create an account. Now, I'm not doing that. I'm expecting, if you haven't done this already, you're already this part. Find this PDF. If you can't find it, ask for help. Click on that. Get this going. What it's going to do is it's going to send you an invite email. It's going to send you a quick email that says, hey, click here. Along this journey, I think you have one more screen, which is, what do you want to call your domain? Mine's called lester.galaxy.starburst.io. All right, so I'm going to trust that's happening. Folks are getting going, and it will make a set a password and that kind of stuff. Now, here's where I'm going to go slow and then kind of pause in just a second to make sure those that are trying to do it with me can get through the set up a catalog together. But if you look really closely, all I've asked, when you do get prompted to connect your data sources or use the sample data, say use the sample data, and then just want to make sure we can run a quick query. So, all right, I'm logging in. In a few minutes, you're going to see this if you haven't seen it already. And if you're setting up, keep setting up. Ignore me, because you really can skip the rest of these statements. I'm just showing folks around, hey, I want to get to the query editor. It really just tells me to use query editor. That's what those bullets on the left are. And then it says, hey, make sure I've got a free cluster for this first option. The second option, they tell me to pick sample. And then the third option says pick demo. So I'm picking what we call a catalog, a schema, catalog and a schema. Sample is the catalog, demo is the schema. And then all reality, once I'm here, I'm being asked to run this, select all from astronauts. So I put this what you see here that I'm scrolling up and down on, this is SQL that is in the PDF. You can copy and paste as you go, or I would just do what I did, copy and paste it all. That way, when you're told to copy and paste, it's already there. I put a lot of SQL statements, comments to kind of keep you oriented if you get a little bit lost or something like that. All right, so we are in lab 1, step 1, run the astronauts. I'll highlight it all, hit this big green button. And if all goes well, I thought I started the server. I guess I let it time out. In just a few moments, it's going to start the server, and it's going to run that query and give me some answers. So let's see if we can get there. And this is a good catch-up moment. Yeah, not answering Monica's questions. I'm doing what I said I wouldn't do, like looking at the chat. But absolutely, if you already have a Starburst Galaxy account anywhere that you have rights to add a catalog, because that's about what we're going to do in just a second. And all that means is, can you, do you have account admin type access? I'm going to peek at my cluster. Okay, good. It's still starting. Or not so good. All right, I want that to finish before I go, but I'm going to just leave it right here, because that way at least I know it's running and I can leverage it in a moment. This gives the folks a chance to get kind of caught up anyway. I'm going to hit cancel and just wait for it to finish. Clusters, still starting. A little longer than usual, but okay. It's important that it does start up for me. Free cluster, please start. Let's start another cluster just for giggles over here. You know what? I think at this point, well, I'm not sure what's taking it so long to kind of get ready for me. I will focus on setting up the catalog that we're going to use to read and write stuff. And I can always come back and double check this. So we'll let it spin in the background to start up. And I'm going to step to step 2. And this is one I know 2 weeks ago we had a little struggles with. So I'm going to probably go slower than any time today walking through this. So if you're doing this with me, the instructions are there, but again, they may seem a little awkward, a little weird, etc. So let's just walk through them together one time. It says, hey, let's configure a data lake catalog. And I went ahead and said, if you did it 2 weeks ago, that one doesn't work anymore because those credentials are gone. And in all fairness, it's really the same bucket. So if you know a little bit about what we're doing here, you could actually just change the credentials, but I'm going to do a series of instructions that will work for everybody here. I'm going to go to catalogs on the left, catalogs, and I'm going to hit that button. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to catalogs on the left. Hey, look, I bet our query will run now. This cluster did start up. Let's see it show an answer for us so I can feel better. All right. Man, I am having too much fun with that. There it is. There's some results. These are our astronauts sample data. All right, let's look at what it's asking us to do, catalogs. Click catalogs in the menu on the left, and then click create catalog. All right, I'm going to collapse with the hamburger bar, all of that. I'm going to slide all this over a little bit to help us out. And then all it says is the next step is, hey, pick on this Amazon S3 tile. We want to create a data source that's connected to Amazon's S3 object storage. Okay. And then it's going to say, hey, a lot of this is copy and paste. So I'll do the copy and paste. And I want you to do it too. This is the name. Use webinar too, but you technically can use whatever you want, but help me out. So if we're helping you out, we'll all have the same things. You can skip putting a description if you're trying to follow along. That's great. So first little step, easy breezy. Call it something. This is what it'll look like in our catalog viewer. The next step isn't that hard either. It says scroll down here to the authentication section. You can see the screenshot on the left, the view on the right, and it's going to tell us use the AWS access key button, a radio button. I push that. If you're familiar with these, this is just 2 keys you need. Everyone's going to use the same one. So just copy and paste those 2 long values. Oops. And we'll find out in a minute if they actually work. So if you mess up when you copy and paste, we'll be able to fix that. All right, that section was all that was. Great, some access information. Here's the one that seemed to trip everybody up last time. It's in the next section where it says Metastore configuration. First and foremost, leave the Metastore set to Starburst. If you don't know what a Metastore is, that's for another day. You can reach out to us so we can talk about it. Absolutely. We're making the assumption you're familiar with the stuff that we covered 2 weeks ago. So let's use this long string here. Starburst 101 hands-on lab. That's our bucket, if you're familiar with that term. If you're not, paste it there anyway. And here's where people got lost. Copy and paste, anything you want here, but copy paste this little section here. If you paste it, this is basically what's going on is we're all using the same bucket. And this field right here is going to do what? It's going to build a directory. And I want your directory to be separated from everyone else's directory. So the notes are trying to tell you, why don't you put your name, something like Lester Martin, that's me. And then I say postal code, but in all fairness, just put a string there, I'll do AAAA, BBB, CCC. There we go. Something. I said use your postal code. That's okay. That's a good one. We're just trying to make sure if there's 2 Lester Martins today, nobody intersects each other. And then the W2 will help us with cleanup after we kill those credentials. So please do me that. All right, if there are questions that start pinging the chat there and see if those the folks helping me here will yell out to me if I need to cover that a little closer. Okay. Good news is you're almost done. Make sure the button here says the default format is Iceberg. It sure is. Click the test connection button. Make sure you get a good green bar that says we're happy that you can get added. We did. We're going to hit the connect the catalog to something button. We just did. We'll say set permissions. Everything looks good. Say save access controls. So no need to read too much. Just focus on what we're asking you to click on. And then when we hit step 4, add to cluster, hit this pull down and you might only have free dash cluster. Look for that free cluster, select him, and then the instructions to say add to cluster. Okay, we're here now, and I should have done a better job of circle they do this later, but as the note says, click on do this later. Don't click on run discovery. And in the lab guide, it just says something like that. When asked to run discovery or something, just say no thank you, no thank you. So we'll do this later. It's a great feature, but nothing we're going to get into today. Actually, in 2 weeks when we do our pipeline and our transformation jobs and all that, we'll do that data discovery. All right, my hopeful is you're at step 5 or you've done this already. And really what it's asking us to do is something very similar. Click on the left where we find clusters, find the one called free cluster, and see if it's in a running state already. And if not, we'll try to make it run. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to open my hamburger up, click on clusters, and there's my free cluster. And it's not in running, and it's not in suspended where I have an operation. It's actually in updating. So I've changed its catalog configuration. I added the new catalog to this cluster. So in fact, it is making those changes and restarting for us. All right. And we're using that word free cluster. A long time ago, if you have a Galaxy instance from a long time ago, the name of the free cluster was something else, but it has been named free cluster for some time now. So I've had this set up for a long time. I just changed my name to what I believe it's out there. All right. While waiting, I got to running. That's what I wanted to see. That's lab 1. It is really just stand up Galaxy, which is free to set up, create a catalog. We just did that. The catalog is the thing that binds us to S3. And Rahul last, he's not able to get the free, add it to the free cluster. I don't get it in the drop-down list. Rahul, I don't know. I'm trying to think how much we can slow down right here. But you know what? The good news, Rahul, I'll just say this. If you come back after the fact and drill into the free cluster and try to edit, if you try to select it here under the catalogs you have, if for some reason you can't bind it, it'll tell us why. Maybe we have a free cluster in a different region. That's why I was trying to not create a cluster. I was trying to use the existing cluster called free cluster that usually is already there. It will be in the right region and everything. It's not that we can't cross region, all this stuff, but for stuff that we do for free, we're trying to kind of guide you down to a path that doesn't cost us a lot of money either. So that might be what it is. My region is my free cluster. As you see here, it's US East, Ohio, AWS. That's where I'm at. So I'll just let you look at that for a second in case anyone is actually creating a cluster. So if you're already have the cluster, it probably should work. If not, check your quote unquote free cluster and make sure it's in this region right here, Ohio, which you can do here on the edit cluster screen. And then you should be able to check box the webinar 2 down here, US East 2. That's what that is, if you're familiar with the AWS region names and stuff. All right, I'm going to assume based on that we can move on and talk about Iceberg, get into it. Taking myself a big deep breath, taking myself a quick sip. All right, let's do some iceberg stuff. Lab number 2. Really, if we look at it, what are we going to do? We're going to create, add some data, query some stuff from Iceberg, and then we're going to start peeking into the fact that the real difference that happens in these modern table formats over Hive, one of the big real fundamental differences is they move the majority of the metadata out to files that live on this right side by side with your data in the data lake. So I got a little bits of that here trying to explain that, but it is a longer, there's a lot to think about and learn. So I'm trying to give you just enough to get you started, and more than glad for you to reach out to starburst.io/forums. We can probably put that in the chat at some point, or other places. You have questions after this, you have my email address. Most of you already have it anyway. All right, so it says, hey, look, Hive was awesome, but maybe the Hive meta store, maybe itself is going to have some scale issues over time, scale and performance issues. Most people, it hasn't had that. Some people, size and scale, yeah. It says that Hive doesn't necessarily know how to handle insert, updates, deletes, and merges. And I use the word consistently because Hive does have a thing called Hive Acid, but not every Hive a service provider out there, or not, not, and it's a little difficult. So there is something like that, but we're going to get something a little bit more rigorous here. Schema changes, partitioning changes. We want to handle those a little better. And then, it would be nice to have what I said earlier, some way to look at, well, what was the data a few minutes ago, a few hours ago, a few days ago, or as of a specific version as well ago too. Yeah, I encourage y'all, Yusuf, I don't know what happened there, but I do encourage folks to use the names I have, like webinar too, because you're going to see that in the copy and paste, but very little times. But just make sure, if you do those, change those names, you got to adapt to that as well. And I'm doing what I said I wouldn't do. I'm looking at the chats. All right, table formats are not file formats. Those still exist. Orcs, Parquets, Avros are good examples that Iceberg will support. And then there are other table formats. Delta Lake, Apache Hudi are two other real good ones that we hear a lot about. All right, so what are we going to do? Let's build a quick table. Here's an example. I said, hey, if you change the catalog from webinar 2, then you need to just adapt that. I'll let you know that almost always we're going to do this. We're going to do a quick use statement at the beginning so we can just reference tables as directly. All right, I have all this in the query editor. So back to query editor, and then I'm going to close the hamburger to give me some room. And like I promised, I can even close it all. I went ahead and copied and pasted all the data in there already. So lab 2, step 2, right? It says run these 2 statements. So I'm just going to highlight them both, kick them off. And all they're doing is I'm creating a schema in my catalog. I'll call it my schema. And then by using the use command, what did I do? I toggled, those pull downs at the top. So now I can just reference tables without their 3-part naming convention. All right, so that we just stood up a schema. That's all we've done. And our editor is reflected to show that now. Okay, let's create a table within there. So you can copy and paste, or again, I already helped you with the copy and paste, so I'm going to use that as well. And what am I running? I'm just creating a table, my Iceberg table, a couple fields, ID, name, and description. And then I was very explicit because in Starburst Galaxy, we can create all kinds of table formats. So I said, make it an Iceberg table format. And then very explicitly, I called out, let's use the default of Parquet. Currently, the Parquet is the default file format type, but just want to kind of, for this group, be very obvious what we're doing. Okay, so that's all we've done. And then let's just add a couple records. And people that recognize those records know that I like to do these records because that's my favorite book. Some characters from their long book, and a couple decent movies and miniseries over the last couple decades. All right, I added 3 rows. How do I know? It says 3 rows over there, so it's pretty good. And it says verified. So, select all. Do a quick select all on that Iceberg table. Okay, Lester, stay focused. Don't look at the chat. All right, there they are. The folks up here are the folks down here. Lido, Jessica, and Paul. Pretty good characters in that. Pretty awesome book. Okay, now this is a step that I'm not going to take time in. In my class that I do this normally, we see this diagram a number of times when we keep thinking about things. So the nutshell here is that, hey, most of the metadata lives in the data lake. Meaning what? Means inside of your table folder, where we usually have data, we have a subfolder called metadata, and there are files, Avros and JSON files. Again, we're not going to take time to try to explain what's happening here. Also, there's the data, the files that we're used to. In Iceberg, we push them a level lower to have a data folder. So my table has a metadata, and my table has a data folder. All that persists on the data lake. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, I'm calling out every time we make a change, and that could be structural or data changes. Any kind of change to the data, to the table, creates a new snapshot, a new version. Snapshot, version, snapshot, same thing. Now that's a high-level picture. If you've never seen that, it's a lot to absorb. I give you a little bit of a walkthrough here. And, the bad news is if I start walking through it, I'll start going into my lecture. So I'll give you a little excerpt. I'll give you a link straight to the Iceberg spec. We have the forums group, and I offered that we have classes, all kinds of ways. And there's lots of ways to understand that. We don't have time to understand it, master it. We're going to trust that it works and make sure we get those 2 key points I have listed here. Data and metadata live in the data lake side by side. If you really want to know, like I said, they bury them under the data and metadata format. And those metadata files are a combination of JSON and Avro files, not of your data, of the metadata. Okay. And then, as I said, snapshots are created every time you add. So with that said, based on those kind of points, like I said, my table should have 2 snapshots. Why? I created the table. That was snapshot 1. And then I added 3 records. That was snapshot 2. So just be thinking about that, because we're going to think about these notions of versions. And even when you understand all of this stuff, it is a little humanly intensive to kind of go pull these down and look at it. So what was nice is the builders created these things called metadata tables, kind of like SQL versions of all that information. So lab 2, step 4 says, why don't I run this? I want to run a quick select on a metadata table. So my iceberg table dollar history. And there we go. I have 2 snapshots. This is my first one. It ended in 121. This is my second one, and its parent was the 121. And you can see this kind of, when did it happen and when did it happen? That's just a quick high level, not showing you any kind of nuts and bolts and details. Okay, staring at the chat. I'm not supposed to do that. Okay, so we got some history. Okay, we're you know, if you've never seen that, that's okay. You just have to trust it's happening. It's a longer conversation to understand it. And if you've been down that path, hang on. We'll have some detailed Q&A in a bit here, or if it's something that's hindering you from doing the lab, you know, ask in the chat if we can talk about your specific question or show something on screen if they can't solve an answer for us. All right. So that's all I said there. Hey, snapshot and another snapshot. They notice their parent. They notice timestamps. There are other metadata tables as well. Like, you know, hey, Hive has a thing called the meta columns. Yeah, meta columns or hidden data, hidden columns. We can say use these metadata tables. So this time, if you look on row 43, I'm actually saying, hey, run a query on the dollar files. And if you looked in the docs are linked in your PDF. It'll say, I'm asking for the current snapshot, tell me the files, all the data files that are utilized. And if you look really, really, really closely at the bottom, it's kind of telling me there's only one. So I'm going to hover over that. There's the one file. It's a Parquet file, where it's the physical name. And on the left here I'm going to just kind of dynamically do it on the right here, but this is what I'm explaining here. It just says things like, hey, that file has 3 records in it. Makes sense. We've seen that. And then it just has some details about that file, some statistics, like value count. So it says 1 is 3, 2 is 3, 3 is 3. It just means column 1, column 2, column 3 all have 3 values. Column 1, column 2, column 3 all have 0 null values. Yeah, it makes sense. That's what we added right up here, right? And the last ones are kind of like mins and maxes. Mins and maxes. So I hovered over it, the lower, and why don't we just talk about the very first field? It's easier to see. It's, you know, the ID. The first field is called ID. The lowest one in there is 101. And if I look at the upper bounds, the highest is 103. That links up to what you see here on rows 21, 22, 23. It also gives you mins and maxes for the string ones. You know, Jessica is the lowest. Paul is the highest. L is Lido. He's in between J and P. Fair enough. So these are mins and maxes. And these are just how we're making an assumption, you know, how column or file formats themselves support this kind of information. And we use, like Hive would say, hey, I can use that to look into the footer of those files and get that to determine if my where clauses might allow me to skip this record. We actually store them in the metadata, so we can actually, we can do that same short circuiting without actually having to go read the files. And think about that when you have 10,000 files and 100,000 files, how that can all of a sudden be a lot faster. So this is one area I think performance can get a big lift. The fact that we pull the metadata that's even in the files up into a thinner layer to grab and run. But, you know, bigger questions, more Q&A. All right, what do I want to do? I want to add just a few more records. All right, so step 5 right here of lab 2. Let's run that. And if you look, we're just adding 1, 2, 3, 4. We're adding 5 more records. That's really what it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. And then it says, why don't you run that files function that files query. Again, that's just backwards. I think I had it forwards too, but I'll just sneak back and run it. And hopefully this makes a little sense. Hopefully you understand data lake tables like we talked about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, there's a new file. We didn't add it to the same file. Files are immutable. We don't want to change them. So we just built a second file right here with 5 records. And it's the same kind of layout that I had before. Only thing I'd point out on this one is that if you look here, a good answer is, yep, they're all columns had values. And truly, null is a value, wink, wink. And then the question was how many, this one just says how many nulls were present by column. And the only null was in column 3. That's the, whatever that was called, description. It had 1. Just some little fun stuff. Same thing as before. These are not upper and lower for the whole table. These are upper and lower for that file, 104 through 301. And I could have put them in a different order just to make it more painfully obvious. All right, other mins and maxes on those strings. What else can we do? Hey, let's just make sure before we move on to the next lab is, do we have the number of snapshots? And you can see that we're looking for 3. So let's see if they show up. And then we'll just take a quick moment and say, why? Why do we have 3? And I think everyone kind of gets it if you bought it before. Snapshot 1 was created table. Snapshot 2 that has the same parent, the snapshot 1, or has the parent from the previous snapshot, is the insert of 3 records. And then the third snapshot is actually after the next insert of 5 more records. So we change structure or we change data, we're going to get a new snapshot. In the next lab, I'll show you what we could do with those snapshots, like time travel and rollbacks. All right, looking at the time, we're looking pretty good. We're about the bottom of the hour, at least in the U.S. terms here. We're about 32 after, and we got 2 of the labs behind us and some intro. So I'm going to keep on pushing and let my team grab me and scream at me if we need some help. All right, so let's do some data modifications. We just did inserts only, you probably noticed. So let's do some things like updates or deletes. We'll save the merges for next week. We're going to cover next session in 2 weeks. We'll do the merge statement a little bit. I think we do. I have to go back and look. If not, the merge statement is possible. All right, so after that, and then again, like I said, we'll play with that time travel. We'll play with that rollback concept. So the only prereq is what we just did, create those tables. And in all fairness, those aren't even prerequisites because I'm going to create a net new table. All right, I'm going to scroll down. Step 1 says, run the schema. This is you already have this. So if you're already there, you haven't moved, you don't have to run the use again. That's just to remind us or help make sure we get set up. Let's build a new table. Kicking out. Now I'm going to build something a little more than a little movie character database from a specific movie. That table could have been called Dune characters. I called it something else like my table, but it was Dune characters. What I'm going to do now, I spent 10 years of my 30-year career on telephone companies. So we're going to make a little tiny provisioning system. So there we go. Phone numbers, your cell number, a time of the event happened. What was the event? What kind of action occurred? And then some notes to go with it. We'll make it a type of iceberg. I've left off the file format. It'll actually become Parquet just because that's the default. And I went ahead and introduced this notion of partitioning. I purposely am not pointing out something more clear in Hive. I'll just kind of say it in Hive when we make something like a day level partition of a timestamp. We have to then extract out the day and call the new field and put it the last characteristics. Iceberg gave us some nice helper functions that say, don't worry about that. Use the event time in your queries like you would want to, and tell me kind of the level of breakdown, the level of granularity you want. So let's set them at the day level. That's called dynamic partitioning, and that's called date functions on the dynamic partitioning. It's worthy, again, of another long statement and question, but those that know what I'm talking about Hive, this is a huge lift. This is worth talking about for 10, 15, 20 minutes all by itself. So partition at a day level for most of us. That's all I'm saying. Not to even care about the partitioning, the provisions. All right, let's look at the snapshots. We should have 1. Now, what I did this time, instead of using a history table, I went ahead and said, there's another metadata table. In fact, I think everything in the history table is also in the snapshots table. So snapshots is the more detailed, and it starts out the same. When did it created? What's the ID of the snapshot? What's the parent? What does column is current ancestor mean, and why is it always true? I think the statement is I'm making a little bit of assumption. Is current ancestor. I originally thought it meant, is the. I think, yeah, I don't have a perfect answer today. I used to think it was just simply that traceability back, but I think it has something a little more to do with is that even is the ancestor even around or something like that. So I don't have a perfect answer, George. We can kind of look at that one. It's probably in the spec itself. But so why don't we table that one? We'll kind of reach back out. I'll reach back out with you and get you a good answer. Okay. So I ran the full on thing. And if you look, it has some other fields. It has not only what happened, not only the event of the thing, the ID, it actually has some kind of operation. So this was an append. Now it's labeled append. I would have called it a create because it was the create, but they choose to call it create. And it tells you some of the more details about those other underlying files. I don't understand either, George, so I'll come back with you on that one. So hopefully, let me write myself a huge note. George is ancestor. There we go. I won't forget you now. And you have my email. Reach out to me if you don't hear from me shortly, the next day or so. And there's some other stuff we're going to look at. So actually what it wants me to focus on is look at this summary. So I'm going to hover over this. And the notes are just telling you to click on that. And you should see something like this, something like that. Now, if I look at the lab guide, it's actually all we're really showing you right now is that a version inside of the version summary, if that version was created in Trino Starburst, we're actually going to put a little bit of a traceability hook in there. We're going to say, hey, the Trino query ID that's responsible for this version is this. The rest of the stuff we can kind of look at anymore. But if you really kind of glance, you see a lot of zeros. That makes sense. This is a table that has nothing in it. There's no data per se, so it's just representing a lot of zeros. And then I went ahead and just had a little fun with it. I said, well, you know what? Before you close that window, go copy that value. So if you're live with me or you're doing it later, just highlight all of this, grab it to your clipboard, and then he's going to say, and this is where, a gentleman that reviewed this said, Lester, you weren't helpful enough. And I was trying to make you think. I probably could have put a few more notes now to look at it, but it says basically, hey, go back up to query history from the left menu. So I'm going to open that back up, query. Usually it's close, open, query history. And then I really just said, look, add a new filter. There's a lot of words here and they're technically right. And you probably can get there. But one thing I didn't tell them to do is say show filters. But show the filters. Let's get rid of this. Add a new filter. Oh, I already had the filter added. Let me delete it. Add a new filter. Select query ID as the type of filter. Paste the name and hit apply filter. What did I do? I found that query that's run, and if you glance at it, it looks pretty obvious. Oh, it was the query, the create table statement. If it was we're not going to do this over and over, but if it was after a merge statement or after a change partitioning strategy or something, you'll see that linkage. So that's just a nicety. Since we have this as a very interoperable format, if it was a table that someone else created the previous version, and when it wasn't us, then we necessarily won't have that traceability because this is a framework that this is a table format that allows multiple SQL engines to, one could create, one could insert, another could query it. So just want to let you know a little bit about that. All right, let's do some fun stuff with this thing. What I want to do, this phone provisioning database table, I'm going to actually go backfill some information. So it says insert in there some phone numbers, 11 and 22, about a week ago, and just put an action. This is a series of events. Put an action that said these phone numbers were ordered. All right, so that's what these two statements are trying to tell us. I'll paste them in. It's actually running. It's one command. I thought it was two separate insert statements. It's 2 rows, and there we go. 2 rows were added. They just want us to make sure the rows are there. So again, I've copy and pasted all this. So there we go. And this is just the data, not the metadata. Yep, phone number 1, phone number 2 were ordered on this time. And that was on February 7th. Today's February 14th, Valentine's Day. That makes sense. 7 days ago. assume that was added then, right? Okay. And it does say, look at the snapshots, hey, take a peek. Well, we should have another snapshot. And I'm not going to look right now. You can, if you want to, if you're there or you already did this kind of stuff, look at that. But I'm going to hit the summary a few more times, but it might hold off a minute or two. So there's another snapshot. Okay, so what do we have next? We're going to add some more records. So 6 days ago, that's what this says. 6 days ago, let's pretend that somebody added the records that said, hey, we've activated those cell phones. They're off and running. 2 rows were changed. If we want to look, and the lab's going to say, run those 2 previous queries to 1, verify that the data is there. Yep, 1122 are now activated. So this is a logs table. We're not necessarily changing this. We're adding an event. Good time series, immutable data, even though we're going to mutate it in just a minute anyway for fun. Oh, and then I said select snapshots. Yep, there's a third snapshot. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and start looking a little bit at that summary stuff again. So it says, I read it, we're all fine. I'm going to look at the last snapshot record, and I'm going to click on that summary thing. So this is what? This is a change. I'm sorry, these were ads. Let me do this, squish, give myself some room. This was an add of 2 more records. So what I would kind of expect, and I'm only going to highlight what you see here, is, hey, look, the summary of this included something like, hey, 2 records were added as part of this. If you look a little deeper, we will in step 7. I'll just point out another 1 or 2 things. Yeah, at this point there are 4 records, as you know, 4 records. Hopefully you've been watching, and we can keep playing with it. Like how many total data files are 2? One file has the first 2 add inserts. Next file has the next 2. And we kind of play with this, but that's as far as I want to go right now. We're kind of getting some understanding and agreement of what that just did. Okay, and our theory of backtracking, we're pretending we're moving forward in time. Now it's 5 days ago. What happened? So step 5. Here we go. So what am I doing? I'm adding the fact that what if a day later someone called in and said, my phone doesn't work. You told me to plug it in and do all my stuff. And they called on that phone, right? No, they used the web, the web channel or something. But yeah, we created another. Let me open this up. We added another record, this error reported record you see right there on phone number 222. Again, the date should be coming closer to today. And if we looked at the snapshots, absolutely, we have yet. Oh, did it run it? 1, 2, 3. Let me just make sure I ran it right this second. You should have 4 updates here. 4. Okay, good. And they all show a pin. Why? Because they really were additive. We haven't really changed anything. We just added yet another one. The first 2 phones created. This time it was a record, another record for 2 phones. This time it was a record for 1. We're not going to go look at it, but you could click in there and play on that summary, and you should see that, hey, you know what? There were 1 new record added instead of so on and so on. We'll come back and look at those snapshots. All right, here's where I get a little funny. I said, well, 4 days ago, so we're marching forward. 4 days ago, someone realized that in these results that all the descriptions were marked null for these different activities. And all we're really going to do is go, oh, there was a system glitch that caused that. So what if we do an update? Now that we fix it downstream, we're just saying anybody that's in an action of order and the notes were null, then set this kind of default message. Same thing for if it was activated with an empty null message there for that. So I'm going to run these 2 statements. Now, the question for you to be thinking about is, how many more transactions is that going to add? I'll tell you in a second, but something to consider, something to think about. And the answer is going to be, hopefully, if you think about it, I actually ran 2 separate statements. And if you don't think about it, I'll say it now. The transaction is single statement. So it's an auto committing model, if you're familiar with all that kind of fun stuff. So I ran 2 updates back to back. So if I looked at the table, and then I looked at the snapshots, what will I see? I should see something like the table. Yeah, the table's here. And all I did is update some existing rows. So I didn't increase my number of rows. I still have 5 rows. I backfilled these nulls with some values. But if you remember, just a moment ago, I had four snapshots. Create the table, add 2 records that they were ordered, add 2 records that they were activated, add a record that there's an error, and then I read update a couple records, and then I did another update command. So I should have six rows here. I have 6 rows. I have 6 snapshots. Anytime I change data or structure, then I'm going to get a new version there. All right. Your event time values are different. Okay, that's great. So let's look at snapshots again. We just did that. We have them. All we're going to make the point now is the operation. If you look on the right, either here or in my lab guide, you'll notice those last 2 were called overwrites. They were updates, and the updates got labeled as an operation of an overwrite. Okay. If it was a delete, it would have said something like that as well. All right, step 7, I'm actually going to just pick on 1 or 2 of those. Let's see which one it wants me to pick on. It says, hey, Iceberg records, those 2 update statements created their own snapshots, operation value override. We just said all that. And then I spend a little time, and I'm not going to spend much time on it other than what you see there is those underlying data files are actually implemented. They're using a strategy called, non-immutable. We don't change them. So we're doing a merge on read strategy for an update. We don't have in-place updates. So what we're really, really doing is we need to identify the records that need to be updated, build delete markers for them. So we'll build the delete markers for the things to be changed. We'll put them in a really cool little file called a delete file that has those positional references. And then to do the actual update, we're going to rebuild the record as if it was a net new add. And we'll just lay it down. Here's the entire record with the other values that you were trying to operate. That's a lot to comprehend. No time to go through it in an hour. I want to kind of get you started. There's lots of good points of going off from there. So that said, if any of that made any sense, and for those that have been in the DBMS world, think of like translog snapshots plus translogs. If the system failed before you built another snapshot, you can read the snapshot and walk the translogs. That's kind of what we're doing here. The table files are the table files, and then we're building these deltas beyond that at read time have to be encountered, incorporated by the engine. But that's how it's going. So what it wants us to do is pick on the very last summary. So I'm going to try to scroll over here. I'm going to click on that summary. And this pop-up has a bunch of stuff in it. But I'm really calling out two values out of there. And what are they? That one made a change, did a single update statement that changed 2 rows. And again, I can't really change rows. What I can do is delete rows and re-add rows. And that's what these red and blue are telling me, and say, you know what, there were, for this snapshot, for this version, I actually had to identify 2 positional deletes. I do have 2 records that met that criteria. And I put those references in a new file, and that's a special kind of file. It's called a delete file. It lives right there with the others. It's metadata, keeps track of it all. And then what else did we said? There was 2 records that were added. So we updated 2 records, which really meant we deleted 2 and we added 2. That's how we handle updates. It also can kind of give you a clue how we handle deletes. We don't really delete it out of the file. We just mark it. Hey, once you read the file, the engine makes sure you incorporate these markers and unwind those records and hand them back. It's called merge on write. Whole big conversation about merge on write versus merge on read. They all have values and needs and goods. Delta Lake, sidebar, Delta Lake loves the merge on write strategy. I've got some issues with it, especially with streaming small stuff all the time, and they also implement merge on read as well. So, but again, bigger conversation, another day. Move on. All right, positional deletes. It's an interesting concept. It's worth spending time. Again, multiply point you back to the spec, very, very specifically in the spec of where we talk about these delete formats and stuff. All right, that's fun for tomorrow, another day. What else can we do today? Today, we can say, hey, run one more time the snapshots. Okay, I already have them run. And then what it's asking us to do is, hey, grab And let's see, first row, second row, replace with your, okay. So it says run your snapshots and grab the second row's value for the snapshot. Okay, let's just do that. So this is my second snapshot. I'm gonna copy that, and it says just put it in your editor. So mine's gonna be, I'm just gonna paste it right here. But in fairness, what it really wants us to do is in this query, select all from provisioning for version as of. I'm gonna move this right here now. And order by. So we're just doing a time travel query against a specific version that has happened in the past. And if you think about it, that was the second version. First version, create the table. The second version was what? Add the ordered records. Okay, there we go. We did a time travel back to that particular point in time. I'm sorry, that particular version number. Now, users really can find all this out because they can query the history, they can query the snapshots, but likely users are going to say, well, why don't I just do this? Why don't I run a select all from phone provisioning and then just use some kind of as of time. So for timestamp, as of current timestamp minus 132 hours ago. 132 hours ago is something, 24, 24, 24. Basically, it gave me an error. It said, you know what? I don't have anything further back than a certain other timestamp. I don't have anything that far back. So I just kind of gave you this setup, and I wanted you to see that it could fail. And in fact, I was actually trying to trick you and say, could you do the thing about going 6 or 7 days ago and pick up just those records? It has nothing to do with the timestamps that are columns of the table, first class columns. It has all to do with the timestamp that's related to the version that just occurred. So all I say is, you know what, change hour to minute, change the interval to some kind of small single digit number, and then run a little bit and let's see what we get. So as of 4 minutes ago, if you look really closely, that might be where I was anyway. Yeah. So let's go a little deeper. Let's go back 7 minutes ago. See what we see. 7 minutes ago, run that query. Okay, let's go 10 minutes ago. Man, we haven't talked that much. 10 minutes ago, what did everything look like? Okay, 10 minutes ago was after the first two transactions, right? So we added the orders, we added the activated, but we haven't yet added the error report, and we haven't added the two updates that fix these null values over here. So time travel, use some right now minus, or if you just know a time, put a time there. If you have a specific as of time you want, you don't have to wing it like this. You can just hard code it if that matters to you. All right, so time travel, pretty cool. Leave it at that. Time travel, pretty cool. And I think number 10, we're done on this lab on number 3. And I'm running out of time. I just noticed. So lab 3 says, hey, let's just roll back to that point in time. So this time he says, hey, go grab the most current version. Okay, the very most current version. That most current version. And we can see it. It's the top one of the other. It says, hang on to that in your clipboard. So, or editor did that. But what it really wants us to do now is, hey, let's do a delete. With the live data, let's delete anything that has phone number 22222 that ran. It says on the right that 3 rows were affected. If we run it, we'll see that all the 222s are gone. So this means, what if, oops, that was an oops. The delete was the oops. How can I get back to where I want? Well, I can run this little statement over here that says, hey, roll back on the webinar 2 catalog, on the my schema on the table called phone provisioning, roll back to a snapshot number, and I paste it right here. I can copy and paste that, replace it here, and then run this command. And after I do this, I can actually, query doesn't return until it's immediate. And if I run it again, guess what? I'm back to where I was right before I deleted all the 222. So the system came back. You might ask yourself, did that add one? Did it roll back to a point in time? I want you to go look at that. I mean, I know the answer, but I want you, if you're that person, to understand a little better, run through your snapshots, your histories, and so forth, and ask questions if it doesn't make sense. All right, that was it for that lab. I take a deep pause and realize that I got 5 minutes left. And I'm going to do it in these 5 minutes. I know if you're with me, you're not going to be able to run as fast as I am in this. So if you want, just take a moment and watch with me, whichever is appropriate. I'm going to blast through this because if I don't explain it too much, I can get done, but I'll use these notes here. I'm going to create a table, add some records. I'm going to change the name of a column. I'm going to add some more records. I'm going to add some more columns. I'm going to do an update that kind of shores up those newly nulled columns. I'm going to rename the table, then I'm going to repartition it. And then I'm going to add some more records with the new partitioning. I'm going to check the metadata. I'm going to change the partition strategy, and then I'm doing compact files. In fact, I can't do all that. I got 10, 11, 56. So I think this one, while we may stay on and make a decision post the next 4 minutes to go ahead and do this and record it in case our system doesn't shut us down, in case folks have some time. But the time that I asked for from you was 1 hour. I'm at the 1 hour, and I want to respect folks that did come. So I'm going to say on that note, before I work Lab 4, thank you for coming. I hope this immersion really quick. Again, we're not mastering all this. We're trying to get you hands-on. These labs are good forever because they don't need any particular data. But they do need to work with a writable object store. So you can adapt these labs way up at the beginning to simply just use a different AWS bucket or Google Cloud or whatever public store or the other one or in Zero One, and walk all these labs on your own anytime you want. But if you want them to work with our bucket, you have through the weekend to work on them. So I'm going to stop right there before we shut it off and ask the folks on our team over here if there's some prevailing questions before I kind of do the bonus time and record Lab 4. But I'll see if there's some themes that we need to be aware of. And they're rushing to come off mute or answering so many questions, I guess.
Hello there.
Hey, Monica Miller from our developer relations team. How are you today?
I'm good. I think we are all good to go forward. The last question being a good one that we're just going to put up here. The overall objective of Iceberg, what is it? Create tables in Iceberg, access it via Trino. I think it's just good to talk about the data lakehouse a little bit of really what the benefits are. So let's jump into that. And then I think we roll with Lab 4.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you can absolutely use Trino without Iceberg. So we're saying data lake tables that are using the Hive pattern, the Hive approach. We need a meta store, and then we'll use our own engine. We're not going to use Hive. So, Iceberg, we think of it as a couple things. One is just, as much as anything, we think of it as the open table format that all the players seem to be happy with and work with. And there's a lot of focus and effort to make sure that it's not just us. We can, once Trino touches it, it's our table. No, we want it to be your table. And then, of course, the table formats, the modern table formats, give us those features that I briefly rattled through when I said we need a better answer, a more scalable and performance approach for metadata. Yeah, put it with the data. We want a consistent way to do insert, updates, deletes, and merge. Yeah, we want that. We want those kind of the features there as well. We want from all that, we kind of get from doing all that, we get this notion of versions. I don't know if I'd make it my number one business purpose there. Think of it more, it's more useful to me for the data engineers and the data teams. But it is a pretty darn powerful feature, not just for problems, but hey, what if I want to recreate something somewhere else? Export it, grab version 2929, drop the data, so on and so forth. We just feel it's the next generation. Not even, it's there now. It's not like it's coming tomorrow. It's available. It's been proved in production for a number of years at big companies. We've adapted it as our preferred table format, but we're not giving up on Iceberg. So if it's Iceberg versus something else, we lean toward Iceberg, but we're going to support what the industry wants to support. And we absolutely don't want to limit all this to Trino either. That is the last thing that we're trying to do. So I hope that helped, Nagash. I don't know, could have taken that a couple different directions.
Yeah, I think that was great. I personally just think it's like, applying those data warehouse like principles to the data lake, which we're seeing is so powerful. Like you mentioned, this kind of new level of data engineering that we're seeing, really capitalizing on the data lake that we have. And so, like you mentioned, that's just choosing your table format of choice, which would be your Iceberg, your Hootie, your Delta Lake, and then choosing your file format of choice, the Parquet, Avro, Orc, and then wrapping that in with your query engine, which for a lot of reasons we think Trino is that best option. So essentially it's just building out that architecture that we see so well and a lot of people utilizing. So that's just kind of the overall objective, is doing this for the flexibility of applying those data warehouse-like principles to the data lake. So I think you're ready to roll whenever, if you want to continue on with Lab 4.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Again, if you got to go, we thank you for your time. If you can hang around, or if you can't hang around, we're still going to post this this recording as well. So definitely get a chance to look at it. Most importantly, I would encourage you to do these labs. You'll get more out of it with the hands-on keyboard than watching my hands on my keyboard. But we all live and learn our own little ways and that kind of stuff. So you do what works for you. All right, coming back at it. All right, the good news is, since we're out of time and I'm going to do this anyway, we don't have to go through it 100 miles an hour. We can take our 10, 15 minutes and run through it. As I mentioned, lab 2 and 3 were the kind of a little bit longer ones in this activity. All right, so this one, I'm going to actually do it again. I'm going to create a whole new table. I'm so mean here. I could have used the same table over and over. It was just fun to do it this way. All right, so I'm going to create a table called planes. It's going to be an iceberg table, tail number, name, color. Really exciting there. What am I going to do? I'm going to add a few records. If you look at those records real close, you'll realize it's the Nike corporate jet. These are all valid data, at least it was. The timestamp I got all this. And old John Travolta's 707. He's a pilot, So 2 records were added. And then we're going to just kind of ignore all that snapshot stuff. We can look at it later. Why don't we, for fun, the table column name, the column description, the column name, which is these values, doesn't make sense anymore. It's really more like a description. So let's just change, alter the column, kind of normal, official normal stuff you might do in a real database and that kind of stuff. And let's run planes again. Same data, just the descriptions there present now. And, well, I guess we had color already. I apologize. Let's add a few more records. Great. We'll add this Learjet here from Bombardier, old 1975 Learjet. Planes last a long time. At least they age better than me. And then I'm going to rattle through just a number of changes. Change these. Add some new columns. Add 4 totally new columns. Here they are right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes, models, years. Introducing a class of plane like helicopter, big jet, little jet, that kind of stuff. And then I realized, while I had 1 or 2 records that had color, going forward, my business said, we don't really care. The color could change with the paint job. And so we did a lot of alterations. I'm not looking, but when you do this yourself, look at the snapshots, look at the history. You're going to see all of these events caused another version. We didn't change the data, but we did change how many versions we have. All right, so we dropped it and dropped. All right, let's do some updates. All I'm doing here is backfilling those nulls. Here, we'll look at it. Select all from planes. Select all from planes. There we go. We've got a bunch of null values, right, as you see on the right. I can get my cursor. No. So these updates are doing that. They're shoring those up, backfilling them with appropriate data. They were nullable, but we'll make them look a little brighter. I'm going to highlight all 3 of them at once. Set. And sure, I'll go ahead and do a select all at the end. When complete, verify it all looks correct. So update, tells me all the things that updated. But when I get to the final finish line, yeah, all the nulls are kind of cleaned out. Years and models. We injected this class, a light jet, a heavy jet, a jet airliner. This is all real data, real classifications. I'm not making it up. All right. Let's also realize, hey, you know what? We're also not just tracking airplanes. We're probably tracking helicopters and other things that would be labeled blimps and that kind of stuff, as an aircraft. So we created the table. Now, if you do a quick select star from planes, it's going to blow up. No such table, obviously. I'm going to change it to aircraft just to make sure you're from aircrafts. I'm not sure if that was the right way to call it aircrafts, but we'll run it. And hang around, guys. We'll do a Q&A too, like we did last time. All right, so it's aircrafts. Got it. Change the name of it, no problem. Now I said, you know what? Why don't we change the partitioning? I don't know if anyone caught it, but we actually don't have partitioning right now. So when you're changing the schema, the partitioning strategy, that could include going from no partitioning to something to something, and then something to nothing again too. So that empty partition is a partition. It's just kind of a default, everything together in one. So we altered the partitions, and for a longer conversation for another day, the way that Iceberg can easily change partitioning strategies is that it doesn't on the fly do any kind of go back in time and repartition anything. It says from this point forward, when you add records, like I'm about to do, I'm about to add these 2 new helicopters because we have that cool thing called class. So we'll run those. They're added. It'll probably say 2 records are added. Yep. And then if I ran just the query itself, the normal query, we should see 2 more records in there. And there they are, helicopter and helicopters, the 2 records. And then the real question might be, okay, well, show me the partitions. We didn't see the partitions metadata table before, but we'll look at it now. And we're going to say, tell me on the current snapshot version number out there, tell me how things are laid out, where the records are across the partitions. If you look kind of closely, and then I'm purposely not just staring back here since we're kind of past that point on the recording here, I'm saying, what is happening here? Well, probably this makes sense. There are 2 records in the partition called class equals helicopter. There are 6 records. This is where it may or may not make sense. They're not actually, this is code word for, well, they're not in any partition of class, even though they have a class, heavy jet airline, or light jet, that kind of stuff. Why? Because they were there before we changed the partitioning. So we don't change partitioning. Now, for those that want to know, can you magically do something? Kind of follow along. You'll see that I'll show you kind of how you can kind of tackle that, post modification, and which is good. Do it in your time. Hey, when you change the schema, there may be some historical data in an older version of the schema. Assuming we're not migrating the old data. How does Starburst handle the different versions of the schema? The truth is, that's, again, a great question for another day, but I'm going to show you the picture you can get out of the, these are things that I do in a multi-day class I have, but probably most of this is in a hard day about Iceberg. But it's kind of like what you see here. You see here that once upon a time, probably around the end of this year, someone decided, hey, let's move away from month-based partitions to day level based partitions. And then someone after, and then we added another months of data, and then someone ran a query that spanned, half of the data that's in December and half of data that's in January. And what we're going to say is, the question is how. I'm going to answer with, well, the how is that it has this beautiful word called correctness that has to do with everything, not just changing partitions. It guarantees that if the changes will be accounted for at query time. So it's basically, it's going to have to read, I'll have to go read all of December or target all of December. Maybe there's things, the metadata allows it to skip some stuff, but it is going to target that partition for all of December, but it's only going to partition the 13 days of January. And it has to kind of get rid of the stuff and the stuff on the left over there. Again, hang around. I'd love to do some open mic stuff. Maybe we'll keep it in the recording or not if you want to. But again, it's there. It works. It takes a little time to walk you through it and get your head wrapped around it, how it works. How about that? Okay, I didn't see the bubble pop up, so I'll leave it alone. Okay, so let's do something. We added to records. We saw the partitions, and yep. Let's change the partitioning. I think that's what I want to do next. Let's change it. This time, let's switch it to year. This is the manufacturer year, right? And if I do that right away, and I run for giggles, well, he wants me to run this. He wants me to tell me, hey, show me, based on that year, how many aircraft we have per year. We have 1. We have 5 records. They all have a different distinct year. And while he didn't ask me to do it, I'll run it real quick. Or when I say he, I wrote the lab. Let's see. I'm going to, just for fun, peek at the aircraft partitions again. I've changed the strategy again. And it's only going to be slightly more confusing because it is keeping track of where things were then and now. And fundamentally, it's kind of telling you there that, yeah, the 6 records that were added when there was no partitioning are still not partitioned. The 2 records that are added after helicopters were created are in the class helicopter. And now we're using year, but nobody's been added. No records have been added or updated, because an update will actually cause a write again, and it'll kind of pick up. And but nonetheless, there we go. Nothing's in the new years. So what I decided to do was make it crystal clear. This is the one that when you copy and paste will look terrible. That's why I encourage you to use that text file. It does get garbled on the flight over. So let's add some dummy records. Set the partition. There we go. Insert these guys. Dummy, why? Because all I really care about is the year. I purposely picked the same 5 years that were out there. It should say 5 rows were added. I'll run the same group by. You should see the same 5 years. This time the count went to 2. And in an interactive class, this is where I say, hey, let's go look at the partitions. What do you expect? We're not set up in this venue to kind of do it that way. So I'll just show you. Now I'm going to say, hey, whoops, not that. Now I'm going to say, show me what's happening. Show me where data is laid out. And you can go look on the file system too if you had access. And that also, could be fun. But if you look really closely, what's really happened, and it might be somewhat confusing. Actually, it shouldn't be too confusing. I should have ordered it by record count. Well, these are the 2 records, the 2 helicopters that were added after the 6 records that were added. And then what do you see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see all 5 of those records themselves got put in their own partition. Year equals, year equals, year equals. So all the 5 years we have there. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. That's a fun one. All right, and we're kind of at the end, but I'm going to show you a little trick or two. Again, all of this is a nail biter, right? It's a teaser to Iceberg. There's a lot going on here, a lot to learn, a lot to understand. Or for those that don't care, does it work? Yes. Good for you. Okay, what's going to also happen in Iceberg, if you think about what I barely brushed on earlier, how we handle changes like updates and deletes that have these little, delete files and stuff. A couple things are going to happen. One, data files are going to be somewhat small anyway. So let's verify that. We have a bunch of data files right now, right? And we can run step 11. We can say, hey, show me the files. Now, I ran this table early on, but this says, show me all the files that are part of the current snapshot. There are 11 files, and they're all about 1K. I mean, these are teeny tiny files. We know why, because we're adding a record or 3 or 5 at a time anyway. So it's okay that they're small. That makes sense. But if we're in production, hopefully they're bigger than that. But periodically, the part of the cleanup that we have to do with Iceberg, either by ourselves or set up an automated job to do it, is do this notion of compaction. So compaction will do what? It'll target all files under a certain size. The size that's getting utilized here is the default. It's 100 meg, so everyone's going to be read. And the engine's basically going to read them and try to rewrite them into fewer number of larger files. And the engine's also going to take into account, oh yeah, those little weird delete files and the add files that are definitely taught. It's going to try to get rid of that notion and build a new set of files that look better and perform better and so on. So that happened really fast because it's teeny tiny. And if we ran that file list again, you're going to see something interesting. Now, the first thing that I want to say that's interesting is the obvious, well, they're not much bigger. They're about the same size. Again, these are so small. The file, it really isn't, it's really just being a Parquet file and has some overhead. But in the day, you're like, why didn't it make one file with 10 records? That would be a question that we talk about interactively. Let me tell you the answer. It actually didn't write one file with 5 things because anything written at this point will use the current partitioning strategy. The current partitioning strategy, I'm going to click on this thing here, is based on year. And if you clicked on each one of those files, you're going to see a different year equals, and each one of those files has 2. Why? Because the original ones we did, they're 1 per. We added those dummies. Now it made it 2 per. So we probably get fewer files than 5. Maybe if we were lucky, just 1 file that was a little bigger. But because the partitioning also made sure we push them in there, I'm really kind of in the notes. I was really leaving you with some. What do you think is happening, and how is that working? And it's all good stuff. Again, we're kind of wrapping it up, but I will just kind of give you a hint. This isn't going to happen. You're not going to have a table with 10 records and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm really telling you is that notion of compaction can also be used if you do want to go backwards and partition some data. So the compaction has other properties like point it to a specific partition, and it has other properties like change that threshold. And what you could do is you could go say, what's the average or even the max size of files? You can use that little dollar files and everything for this partition, and then run that command against that partition with a higher value than anything that's there. And what will it do? It won't make crazy size files. It'll end up probably building normal, kind of the same size files, but it'll actually rewrite them. So the new version will be the same data as it was the version before, but you rewrote those records. So you can, via some easy manipulation via command line, and you could do that on your time with your CPU intensity and find the right time, the right place. But you may not necessarily need to do that, but you have that option to do something like that. And there could be some other less exciting ways than that, but that's one quick way to do it. All right. I did it again. I brought too much information to an hour. I'll have to keep learning. So next time we'll do a little less. And yeah, Richie and others would love a deeper dive. Absolutely. Right now, yeah, how we do that is worth a conversation. So you have my email address. Yusuf, Michelle, Monica, sorry. My gosh, Monica's going to hit me. Monica, Yusuf, are there any other kind of high-level questions that have been floating around that we might spend a moment to talk about before we wind down the recording 15 minutes later? This lab was on time, 15 minutes.
It's been great. I think we hit everything, but if there are any other questions, this is your time to throw them in the chat, and we can quiz Lester a little bit. That will be fun. But I think, the basic principles, we did a lot of information in this lab, a lot of great things that we were able to talk about. And it's just been awesome to see a little bit of the, tip of the iceberg, if you may. So,
love it.
Awesome. And with that, I think we've got questions answered, and go ahead and send us an email if you have anything else. It's been a wonderful time. Thanks for spending the hour and a half with us.
Thanks, everybody. See you on the other side.